Roger, wonderful. I know you and I are talking about one of the most interesting things coming out now, of course, is the appointment of the next Secretary of Defense here in this country. There was some talk last week that Chuck Hagel was perhaps not going to be nominated. Now, you have a scoop for us tonight.
Well, it's not a scoop. I'm saying that it's most likely that on Monday they will announce that Hagel will be the choice. It's obviously something that raised a lot of concern, and especially because the Defense Department has a certain amount of independence that other government departments don't have. It'll be a tough time because they have to make a lot of cuts. And, you know, he's a Republican, but most of the Republican senators were not too thrilled about his nomination either. So I think it is something that, you know, we'll live with and we'll work with whoever is in office. But the concerns, because of his past statements and his record on a lot of issues, not just Jewish issues, I think American issues, raised concerns.
How does an article such as Tom Friedman in the New York Times, where he says it's the pro-Israel lobby that's challenging, when really there are a lot of American groups that are opposed to his candidacy, when he propels the pro-Israel lobby as being the top and writes about it in the New York Times, and if he gets the nomination and he gets in, how does that make his attitude towards the Jewish community in Israel?
I think Tom Friedman has gone off the cliff, which is a common term.
Not the fiscal cliff, a different cliff, yeah.
Political cliff. I think his columns have increasingly become hostile and, frankly, unjustifiable. You can differ with a view on Israel, but his position, it was not the Jewish lobby. Unfortunately, one of the early articles in a major publication spoke about this as the Jewish problem, when there was many other groups and many people, because of positions on the military, his opposition in certain things in the past, in relation to other groups, that raised many more concerns than this. And I think there's no reason why Jews as Americans can't express their views, but it was never a Jewish campaign. It was never intended to be. And the lobby, I think, actually was pretty silent, the quote, official lobby, silent on this. So I think it was an official, I think it was, let's say, an unfortunate characterization on his part, to say the least. And I don't think he did it without certain people encouraging him to write this article.
Who were those people that encouraged him?
At that point, I understood that Hagel would get the job.
But who are the people behind the scenes that have been pushing Tom Friedman?
People who were pushing his nomination.
So by doing that way, by having him attack the Israel lobby, it ensures his nomination.
And it comes from Friedman, so they think it has credibility, even though I think his credibility in the community has diminished a great deal.
Something among the list that we have to deal with in the new year, right, of problems and options.
And it's very important about who gets the Ministry of the Defense Secretary's position. Department of Defense is critical in a lot of issues, and with the challenges that we're likely to face in the coming year, not in the next 4 years, that it makes it all the more important. And I'm obviously referring to Iran and decisions on Iran, where in the past he has not been, let's say, in line with a lot of positions of other members of the Senate and people who I think have taken the right positions. There will be other decisions in vis-a-vis what's happening in the Middle East, the changes in the Middle East, the new technologies, the relationship with Israel. I think ultimately the relationship with Israel will maintain. I think that as Secretary of Defense, he will see the realities of the importance of Israel to the United States, the commonality of interests that they have. But individuals do make a difference in terms of the tone and the attitudes that they manifest and the direction sometimes that things take. So I think it's not insignificant, but I think ultimately the relationship with the United States and Israel are not built on individuals. They're built on fundamental values, consistent interests, and we have to work hard to make sure that those aspects are what is known.
Even though, like you said on other occasions, they set the tone, where even though at the end of the day it's not going to change, but part of the problem that I guess in the last 4 years has been not so much substance but tone, and this will just add to that tone deficit.
Well, the president has made very clear that he will not tolerate Iran having nuclear weapons. I think that is the fundamental policy. Hopefully that will be sustained and that will be manifest as we go ahead. But and he sets the policy, not the Secretary of Defense, not others. But I think there's an influence, and you have others in the administration who may have contrary views. to the president or try to influence the president to moderate his views, and certainly there are many who are still pushing the negotiations line, and we see that people are advocating the P5+1 talks, which are going to take place. The Europeans are very happy if the United States engages in direct negotiations, and there are several ways that that could be important. One is it the president saying, look, I want to show that I gave them every avenue, every way out of this, or does this show that the Iranians that we're still not determined to do what has to be done? Because the question is not what we say, but how do the Iranians hear it? What do they perceive it? And if they perceive us as being weak and having the negotiations being open-ended and that it will continue forever, then that destroys the strong positions and counteracts any sense on their part that they're facing a hard deadline. So the future of course of action will not be over years, it's going to be about months. Therefore, everybody who comes into play in this is so important and increases the sensitivity about the nature of the appointments and statements people make and the impressions that are created. You know, I don't know, will the Europeans really have the guts to stand up and do the right thing? They very rarely do. We see that the United States led the sanctions. They came into the picture. Will they, if the United States decides to act? And what happens if circumstance demand that Israel has to act? Where will everybody be? These are really critical life and death issues. This is not, you know, just a question of some of the hypothetical issues that people often deal with and get locked up with, but rather the critical issues about the future. Look at the situation in Syria. What potential things could happen there? And I think the U.S. is on top of the issue of the chemical weapons, and I think
biological weapons, right?
And Israel isn't. The biological are less important because they're not stable and very hard to use. But the chemical weapons, they have huge stockpiles. But you have sarin gas, you have nerve gas, you have all sorts of horrific weapons in huge quantities. Even if a small percentage falls in the hands of bad guys. So this takes Israel, the United States, Jordan, others are all working together. And I think that's why Bibi made this secret visit to Jordan. I think a lot of it had to do with the Syrian chemical.
But they say he was rebuffed by the Jordanians as far as trying to do
a secret weapon. How does a secret meeting? How does anybody know whether it was rebuffed?
It's in the report, right? They wrote about it in the papers.
Believe me, Jordan is more worried about Syria than Israel is. They will pay the price first, because not only because 100,000 Syrians who have come in, but because if the chemical weapons get lost, they'll easily find their way there. You have huge, numbers of people who have come into Syria. They don't know who they are for a large part. So there are a lot of ramifications of this. Believe me, the king is in a very tenuous situation himself internally, and I think Bibi wants to show him support. But it was really mostly about the chemical weapons and things like that they talk about. But you have Syria, you have the changes in Egypt, you have so many things going on at the same time. And therefore you need strong people who have clear sense of mission, and there has to be a clear consensus in the administration so that they can project to the world a strong stance that others will then follow. The Europeans follow, they don't lead. But when the United States really puts the screws, and they did on the sanctions to their credit, and they have on other issues, then they generally will follow. We could not get them to follow on unilateral declaration. Then you saw that the Europeans, rather than voting against, abstained, and some even voted for it. And I will say again, the United States did try to move them on it. So that's why clear positions, well articulated, and on Israel's part, the same thing. They have to have clear policies, articulate them well, so that there are no misunderstandings, and not to have controversies that are unnecessary. And especially now with an election where everybody can say anything and does say anything in Israel, you know how heated they get, and sometimes drive people to say things that in normal circumstances they wouldn't.
Malcolm Hoenlein, as always, a pleasure to see you, and thank you for being a part of us. And it was good spending some quality time with you over this great convention weekend.
It was my pleasure, and I promised Chatzkel Bennett that I would say something nice about him. So I want to say something nice about Chatzkel Bennett, who's really one of the good young leaders emerging. And you see here, one of the really nice things at the Aguda is that we see a lot of good young people who are emerging from all the different parts of the Orthodox world, from Hasidic to those who are to the Yeshivish world, to the others who want to be involved and who follow the news, and it's very encouraging. And the real message is that we all have to be united, and that means people in the Aguda, within the Aguda circles, outside of the Aguda. Jews have to put aside differences today to recognize that we are facing challenges that need all of our resources. Every Jew, everybody who cares. And if we're united, we can unite the rest of the world around us. But if they see our divisions, we drive people away, and they get confused and they don't understand. It means political leaders and religious leaders from other sectors. We have to bring everybody together if we're going to meet the challenges that future generations will hold us to account for what we do now, because their security, their lives will be at stake in these decisions.
Malcolm, thank you. Look forward to having you back, and I always enjoy listening to you and John Batchelor.
I always enjoy listening to you and Zev Brenner.
Touche. Thank you.